Breyer, Chairperson of the Zoning Board of Appeals. The Zoning Board of Appeals is a 9-person volunteer citizen board appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the city council. Our procedure this evening is as follows. First, we will hear from the Planning and Development Services Unit, represented tonight by Mr. John Barrett. Then the petitioner or his or her representative will make his or her presentation. Petitioners will have 5 minutes in which to make their presentations. Board members may ask questions of either the city or the petitioner. We will acknowledge any written comments received by the board. We will allow an appearing party to express their support or objections. The board will discuss the appeal and formulate a resolution to approve the appeal. 5 affirmative votes of the board will be required for an appeal to be granted. Finally, any qualified party who is aggrieved by a decision of the board can appeal that decision to the Washtenaw County Circuit Court on a timely basis. Before we do roll call, I believe John has a quick announcement.
As staff, I would like to welcome our newest member to the Zoning Board of Appeals. It's Council Member Elizabeth Nelson. Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Great to have you.
And with that,
Great to have you.
we have roll call. I am here. Mike Daniel.
Here.
Dave DeVarty.
Here.
Mike Dobmeyer. Nicole Eisenman. Here. Todd Grant.
Here.
Julie Weatherby.
Here.
Elizabeth Nelson.
Here.
Charlotte Wilson. Here. We have a quorum. Moving on to approval of the agenda. Any changes to the agenda? If not, do I have a motion to approve the agenda? Motion from Julie, support?
Second.
From Todd, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Moving on to approval of minutes. We have minutes before us from the December 5th, 2018 meeting. Any comments or corrections to those minutes? If not, can I get a motion to approve?
I move we approve the minutes.
Motion from Dave, support from Mike. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, moving on to petition ZBA 18030, 532 South Fifth Avenue. John?
Okay, my name is John Barrett. I'm the zoning coordinator for the city of Ann Arbor. The first petition before us this evening is ZBA case 18-030, 532 South Fifth Avenue. Mark Schroeder, owner of Mahalo Properties, is requesting an alteration to a non-conforming structure in order to construct an addition to an existing duplex. Chapter 55 of the Unified Development Code, Section 5.32.2, subsection C, non-conforming structure requires Zoning Board of Appeals approval when increasing the floor area and exterior dimensions of the structure. The addition will meet the R4C district setbacks, but the parcel does not meet the minimum lot size and lot width requirements. The property is located between Packard Street and East Madison Street. The home was constructed in approximately 1901 and is 1,534 square feet in size. The lot size is 6,621 square feet. The district requires a minimum of 8,500 square feet and a minimum lot size of lot width of 60 feet. The approval to alter a non-conforming structure being requested is a result of the owner's desire to construct an addition to an existing duplex. The addition will be 21 feet 7 inches in width and 42 feet in length and 2 stories in height. The proposed addition will meet the side and rear yard setbacks for the district. The structure currently contains 2 units, 1 bedroom efficiency and a 2-bedroom second unit. The addition will increase the front unit to 4 bedrooms and the back unit to 4 bedrooms. If you'll turn your attention to the monitors, the first slide is the location map. You see the highlighted parcel just south of Packard Street and north of East Madison. Next slide is the aerial map showing the surrounding conditions and the existing conditions of the neighborhood. The next slide is the zoomed in aerial photo, and this is the approximate area where the addition is being requested. The next slide is the survey that was submitted with the application, and you see the existing footprint of the structure. The next slide is the site plan showing in dark line in the shaded area the requested building addition. The hatched area shows the existing footprint that will be demolished and be replaced with this addition right here. The next slide is a floor plan of the basement that was submitted with the application, showing that there's going to be a laundry room and some storage. Next slide shows the first floor plan of the 2 units with the 2 unit separation right here. 1 unit in the back and 1 unit in the front. And the next slide is showing the second floor plan, second level of the units. This is a roof plan that was submitted showing a aerial of what the roof and the existing or proposed construction will look like when completed. These are the elevations that were submitted. The one on the left is the rear or the west elevation. You see the addition in the shaded area and the existing structure right here. The elevation on the right is the front or the east elevation. The next elevation that was submitted is the north elevation, showing from the side, and the addition will be this portion back here. And this is the south elevation, and the opposite side showing the addition right here. These are the photos of the site. It's the front of the house. This is the side of the house, and this is the portion of the existing rear that will be demolished. These are photos from the back of the property. Photos of the side of the property. You can see the adjacent property to the south. This is the property to the south, just from the rear yard. This is looking down the driveway and at the neighbor's property, and you see the relationship between the 2 properties.
Those trees are.
Sir, sir.
The southern.
This is the rear yard of the property. This is the adjacent property to the south. This is the adjacent property to the north. And this is looking directly across the street. That concludes my presentation. I'll take questions at this time.
Thanks, John. Todd?
Yes, this may have come up, this was before us on December 5th,
Correct.
and this may have come out then, but refresh my memory. Is there a maximum number of bedrooms that this place can have? And given their proposal, what are the required number of parking places?
So the maximum number of bedrooms that you can have in a R4C multifamily district for this configuration would be allowed up to have 6 in each unit. Each unit would be required to have 1.5 parking spaces for a total of 3 required parking spaces.
So the total proposal could actually have 12 bedrooms.
Correct.
Good, thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Okay, the petitioner's here. If you could please state your name for the record, sign in. You'll have 5 minutes.
Mark Shorter, I'm the owner of the property. I want to thank everybody for the attention tonight on this. They said we were over here, you know, and Todd brought up we were here one time before. There was a couple of things on here that was questionable last time we were in here. I wanted to get that taken care of as well. We went back and talked about a shared driveway, and it is not with this property. Shared driveway with the properties to the north on 328, 326. So that is over there on the deed and stated like that, and it's also noted that no shared property on our certified survey. Okay, so stamped. Another thing on here, we talked briefly on here that, you know, possibly, and at one time this area was going to go in the Historical Society. Talked to Patrick McCauley, who's a co-author of the Historical District over here with Ann Arbor, and used to sit on the Historic Board. If anybody would like to have his 66-page PowerPoint presentation that he does at Con Ed is very detailed on what they're talking about with historical properties. This one being at 85% rental properties over here. He said that it wouldn't come back up again. There's just too many alterations to the properties, too many properties that are rental properties, you know, student rentals and so forth, that it would not be coming up as a historical property. in this area. We've come back in and changed the design after our last meeting over here. We're meeting what the city requirements are for the building and for the side clearances that are on here, both on the north side and the south side of the properties. We're meeting our side clearances on the back side of the property. We've got it over here for parking for, 1.5 cars per unit. We can actually go and park 4 cars back there if we had to park this over here. Okay? So we have altered the property to try and make it more aesthetically pleasing. We've had some people I've talked to over here about the property in the design work that, a lot of, again, over here being with vinyl siding and so forth. We don't plan on going back to this property again. There's a rendering. Did you get the rendering? We did some modifications though on the building itself as well. On the front of our building, if you look at it closely, there's some dental molding and some other parts around the porches on here. We've taken the north side of the building and extended some of those details into this new design. If I can find it here. Here we go. So this part over here, this porch gets stretched by another 7.5 feet. And then while we're stretching that porch, the dental moldings and these other broaches that's over here at the top of this, as well as the columns, we're carrying that onto our extension over here just to keep the aesthetics of the building. There's one comment over here that Germantown made, and I was talking to a couple of people from the committee, and they referenced me to a document that's over here in writing, and it's quoted. Our preference has always been to see houses restored and supplemented with well-designed additions or perhaps a carriage house structures with additional units. So coming back in here and redesigning this after our last meeting, we took that statement into account. They come over here and leave the original facade of the house and to add this addition and try and carry some of those details from the original part of the house into the side of the addition where the entrances are going to be. Okay? Again, we're meeting the side barriers, both on the north side and the south side. We're meeting it structurally over here, as far as what's going to be required out of the building department as well. And once we get done, again, it'll be 2 4-bedroom units, and the reason we're staying with that size is because of the demand that we're getting for that. I've got one set of customers that's our tenants that's already in the front unit. She's getting married come out August and has already requested to move back into this building after we get done with our remodeling. They come back from their honeymoon like on September 9th, and they're wondering if we're going to be all done with this building by then. I'm not too sure. But I'd like to keep them over here because, number one, they're millennials. So we don't rent to just students, we rent, to wherever, where the property may be located. And one of the things that we're trying to do, or at least there's a couple of us owners, is get more of the young kids attracted to our downtown. And that's what we all want. That's going to be the future for us. We can still rent this out to the young millennials on here, $2,500, $2,600 a month on a 4-bedroom. He works at Barracuda. She works in the medical industry. He doesn't drive. Okay? Takes a bike or else takes a bus every day. And they're willing to come back over here and they want to stay in the unit. And that's what we want to have attracted to this. Okay? I'm in a position where I don't need to go and rent this out at $800 or $900 per bedroom per month. I can do it at $750 or $775, $2,500 or $2,600 a month, and still put food on the table. Okay. All of our properties are under an estate. We do the long-term planning for our properties. Eventually, they're going to go to our daughter. That's where they go to. So.
Thank you, sir. Any questions
questions?
for the petitioner? Todd?
Yes, and I'm sorry if I didn't follow everything you said. You were, my hearing is not as good as it used to be, and I think you might have been talking lower than you usually do. Would you briefly summarize the main design differences between what you're asking for today and the December 5th one?
So
I'm
what we
sorry,
did-
I'm asking you to repeat if you could just sort of summarize the bullet point form.
Yeah. And what we tried to do is that with that south side, we were asking for over a 5-foot variance last time, Todd. And the reason we wanted it over to the south side of the property, because we wanted to try and get more room between the driveway and our north side neighbor. So, which is 532, okay? talking to that neighbor over there, he's not so concerned about it. He says, Mark, he says, I already got 3.5 feet over here. If your driveway's gonna stay at that edge, and you maintain that 3 foot, I'm fine with it. Go with it. I'm not gonna be concerned about it. Okay? So the architects come back in and meet this over here with our 12-foot sidelines. We come in and meet this still on both the south side, Todd, and the north side. And we've got the correct size driveway, and we still get that 3.5 feet away from our north side neighbor as well, to make them happy.
Plus the architectural details carry over.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's what, again, over here, when we're talking about this with Historical Society, and they got it in the quote in the article that they supplied me, okay? Not the Historical Society, but the German committee, is that they don't like to see the original structures, being interrupted. Come in, and if you do something like, stated over here in writing, if you do an addition on the back, and still keep some of the architectural appeal, is what they would prefer. And so we've done that, including adding the dental moldings and the extra posts and everything going down the side.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
If I can just piggyback onto, my name's David Lewis, I'm the architect. Just to clarify, at the last meeting, we were actually asking for a variance for the side yard setback. Right now, there are no variances for this current design, it's just the permission to alter a non-conforming structure.
Right. A much easier standard, right?
Yeah. So again, on here, when we looked at our design work and everything, we tried to take into account other people's inputs, including the Germantown committee. I mean, looking at the cohesiveness of other stuff. This being 85% rentals in that area, we've gotten some feedback too that, this is probably gonna be an over improvement, but again, we're looking at it for the long term. We're gonna come in, instead of vinyl siding, be, James Hardy siding and so forth. We're not the short term. It's in our estate. It's going to our daughter when we get done. We're no longer around.
Dave?
I note on the proposed floor plan for the basement, you've got egress windows on the south side. Now, since that's not habitable space, that's not required by the housing code.
No.
Is that, you're
But
just
so
putting
we
that
put
in.
those in there and talking to the housing on there too. If you're gonna have storage down there, like Class A storage, that's gonna be lockable for their bikes and stuff.
Then they want egress windows for
They
that?
ask. It's not required.
Okay.
But we're also showing up at the building department, Dave, that's gonna be Class A storage so they can lock up all their units downstairs, each and everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions for the petitioner? Elizabeth?
Your tenants right now, I know you mentioned the woman who's getting married.
Candace?
Your tenants right now, how many of them are students versus non-students? And I ask that not because I think that students are anything to be frightened of, but I'm just curious.
I got one foreign exchange student.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
Out of
and-
how
and
many
people-
tenants?
Out of 3. So the ones that are downstairs, both of them are professionals.
Okay. Thank
So,
you.
Yeah, I mean, and it's been a good attraction like that. I've been able to hit on that a couple of different times, Elizabeth. And trying to kind of go towards that a little bit more, because we're fine with the millennials. And we've all read about this. Some of them don't even have a driver's license. They don't want to go long and drive. They don't want to commute. They want to live in the city where they can either walk or drive or take a bus to the either workplace, the restaurants, to the movie theater, whatever. I think it's an untapped market. So we pay to have a study done, and we're trying to shift a couple of our places where we try and hit some of the millennials. So, last but not least, I mean, and we all saw what's going on with Fingley's and stuff downtown. But I mean, we had a 1.6% increase in student enrollment last year. That's over 600 kids, okay? They still need the housing too. I'm trying to capture a little bit of a different market, especially when I got somebody that asked me.
Dave?
I'm always concerned when people are talking about students or not students, or what type of family or how many kids, because I have a friend who's the director of the Fair Housing Center,
Yep.
and I just want to have you affirm that you abide by fair housing standards and you don't discriminate based on family status.
No, I mean, on this one, Dave, again, we had her ask it, as a matter of fact, she put it right in the email on us. I do have some other houses over there that cover that side as well.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions for the petitioner? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank
If there's
you.
anyone from the public who wishes to speak on this petition, please step forward, state your name, you'll have 3 minutes.
My name is Marianne Zorza. My husband and I own the home next door. The main difference here is that it was brought out at the last hearing that the lot size of this house is too small for an R4C configuration. So if he were to alter the house, he could only put a single-family dwelling with 6 bedrooms. So this isn't compliant with the lot size for R4C. It's much smaller than other lots on the street. So what we're concerned about here is density. This was never a neighborhood that was addressed in the Historic District Germantown. We were actually left out. And one reason they couldn't approve the Historic District is they left out the most historic block, ours, because none of the houses on our block have been altered since 1901. They would all be considered Victorian. So what we're concerned about, I'm happy that he wants to retain the front and incorporate architectural details. The problem is it's just way bigger than anything in our neighborhood. This is an actual low-density student housing, mixed owner-occupied area. And we don't have a single house on that block with more than 2 bedrooms in an apartment. We have several houses that have not been converted into apartments that only have 2 to 3 bedrooms. The highest number of bedrooms per unit is 2. And when I look, he says there's only going to be 4 bedrooms in both units, but attached to what I drew off online this time was one rendering of the basement showing 2 beds in there. So I don't see, if you approve this, how you would stop him from filling that basement with beds. So what you have is suddenly, on one of the smaller lots on the street, a potential for 12 people living there. No one has more occupants than 6 on the street. So you're doubling the density. And we think this will destroy the neighborhood. It's really quiet. Everyone does love living there. His tenants want to return because it's a quiet street. And if you start opening it up to 6-bedroom extravaganzas, we're turning into Animal House. And I don't say that to disparage students, because we rent to undergrads and grads. We have students who don't want to leave. They sometimes stay there after they've graduated, because it's such a great street. This will totally shatter our neighborhood to start bringing in this many people with so little parking. I know that there's this rule for 1.5 per unit, but that's not going to work out. I also, okay, I guess that's it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to counter one thing on that. 'Cause the house-
Mark.
Oh, hold
No.
on.
Mark.
Is there anyone else
Mark.
here to speak on this petition?
Yeah. I have here a panoramic view of Ann Arbor from the taken.
Sir,
Can you
You are-
state your name, please?
Oh, sorry.
No
And
worries.
address.
Jacobson. I live on the south, I'm next door on the southern side of the house. The, it's density that is the problem with this, not who's living there. And it's, if you look at, I don't know if you can have on your screen my southern exposure.
Yes.
And if you could put the one on with the trees from the front, that one. Those trees are on my lot, and this that you see on the arborvitae there. And that, now go back to that first one. If, this is a dorm, is what he's building. And like my wife said, this is sort of people have compared it to the Shire from The Lord of the Rings, where suddenly they show up in this place in Ann Arbor that you wouldn't expect, where it's small apartments, quiet, because for various reasons that it's always been a very delightful place to live, and people have stayed for long periods. We typically had rented at various points to foreign professors that would show up for a year and things like that. But mostly now it's undergrads and grad students and law students. And it's, if something of that density is built with, the city admitted in one report that we read that they can't really control how many people live in these bedrooms that he wants to put in there. And if there are 10 or 11 or 12, depending on how you look at these drawings, even though two of them in the basement are labeled storage, they do have, they could be, putting a bed in it would not be inconceivable. This would be completely out of the character of every other house on the block and in that neighborhood. He keeps mentioning the density of rentals as 85% for the Germantown area, but not for this street. These are professors. Dr. Strassman and Dr. Vincennes live across the street from us. I met my wife next door 40 years ago, and this is a place that is on tours of Ann Arbor, this block, where people are looking at these historical houses and how, just because it looks, as you walk through the backyards, it's like the Shire. It's rabbits and squirrels and trees, and as people come down the street on Fifth Avenue, they let off on the gas, and there's not even any traffic noise for that reason. And this would not be an addition. This would detract from it to an extent that even though none of my other neighbors were able to show up tonight, they were all calling me from a hospital in Bev's case, and Dr. Vincennes is in Africa right now, but he would be here tonight speaking against this for these reasons that I've mentioned. And I'll leave these drawings, and I've sent a letter, which I hope you'll all read. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I add just one?
No, I'm sorry. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on this petition?
I want to say something favorable. Okay. I just want to return to say that we're not opposed to an alteration of the back. We would just like it a little bit smaller in scale, and the problem of too many students would be solved if it were 4 units with fewer bedrooms. And that would be consistent with what's in that neighborhood. But when you get into the 6, 7 unit, the bedroom things, it's going to make problems. And we have traffic problems because it's on such a steep slope that the city removed the parking on the street. But when there's overflow of students, they park there anyway. And when we back out of our driveways, we can't see, and there's been a number of accidents. And so that's one of the problems, is that's parking isn't going to take care of 12 students.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
You can.
Again, my name is David Lewis. I wanted to just kind of throw out some of the numbers because she did bring up density, that the R4C, even though technically this lot's doesn't meet the 8,500 square foot minimum, but it's designated as R4C, and the R4C density is 1 unit per every 2,125 square feet a lot. The 2 units we're proposing on this size lot results in 1 unit per 3,267 square feet. So it's about 2/3 as dense as what the R4C allows. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear. Thank you.
But the lot is 25%
Thank-
smaller than I foresee.
Okay, ma'am, thank you. Any other person who wishes to speak on this petition? I will note that we did receive some letters. We have a letter of support from Julie Lewinsky, a letter of support from Michael Rudelich. We have a letter of support from Miller Building LLC. Unfortunately, I cannot read the signature that's on there. A letter of support from Daniel Peterson. Letter of support from Jen Langenberg. We have a letter of opposition from Claudius Vincenz. Letter of objection from Beverly Strassman. And a letter of objection from Frank Richard Jacobson. Yes, John?
Just a couple points of clarification. One is this petitioner and this property is limited to 2 units for this parcel. Once you go to 3 units or above, the property had to be site planned, so it's restricted to 2 units. I just want to make that clear. And also, the city does have an active enforcement staff. We have a rental housing department, and myself, we respond to overcrowding complaints consistently, and so we have inspectors that go into rental housing units daily, and that's one of the conditions to receive your certificate of rental registration. That's what I was going to bring up. I mean, you look at our records over here.
Microphone, please. No worries.
That's what I was going to bring up. You keep saying 12 people, it's for 8 in this one, okay? And that's where we want to stay at, because the majority of calls that we get, we measure it. I'm a dual degree in engineering, I'm a PE as well. And the majority of calls, 70% of them, are asking for 3 and 4 bedroom units, and that's where we want to stay at, okay? The other part of it on here, like John said, certificate of occupancy, once you call for that, they do come in, and they're pretty strict on it. We've got an excellent reputation with the building department, as well as with the city inspectors. When you talk to Terry, Brad, or any of the other ones, you won't see any red check marks on over here on our properties. And we try to keep it like that, and we do that for a reason. We've got other business that we run besides this over here, and we just don't want to have the hassles or interrupt the kids who are trying to take care of their education. That's what they're here for, period.
Thank you. The board is now in discussion. Todd?
Yes, well, I originally asked John, what were the maximum number of bedrooms, which is 12, and to me, that addresses a lot of the density issue. In my mind, what we have here is someone was willing to carefully plan for particularized market and preserve the facade and architectural details of an old building, but also renewing and expanding property, which is a plus. And on the negative, people who are in the neighborhood, who are used to the neighborhood being a certain way, and this neighborhood will change. I'm not convinced that the project will have a detrimental impact on the neighborhood. It will change the neighborhood, but things always change, some at a very rapid rate, some at a very slow rate. And from my way of thinking, a lot of the housing near the central campus for too long in this town has been marginal, and that somebody is willing to invest and improve in a property, albeit add additional housing for students, I look upon as a good thing. So on balance, I'm going to vote yes for this project.
Mike?
Given this is not a variance request, it's a lower standard of alteration to a non-conforming, meeting the parking requirements, meeting the setback, it's an improvement to the property. I have no problem with the density, I'm voting yes.
Dave?
I can feel the, and empathize with neighbors and their sense of what's happening with the changing neighborhood and increasing problems, like parking, for example. And I grew up on Dewey Street and lived there till 2000, until I moved to the other side of Packard, to the tenured side of Burns Park. So I sympathize with the longtime residents who have lived there. I have to say, last month, we voted against your variance request. It didn't meet, frankly, any of the standards that we have to go by in order to approve a variance request. In the case of an alteration to a non-conforming structure, it's a very mild standards that you have to comply with, and you've done that. I will, although I sympathize with the neighborhood residents, I I will be voting for this and commend you for making some concessions on the architectural side to keep those architectural details in place and extend them.
Yes, Elizabeth?
I'd just like to echo the words of, I'm learning names. Thank you. I do appreciate that this is a change, but I agree with you that it doesn't feel like it's going to be a drastic change in a way that's likely to be negative, frankly. And I think a lot of effort has been made to make this structure a positive addition to the neighborhood, and I'm going to be persuaded to vote yes as well.
Any additional discussion or a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Dave.
Petition ZBA 18-030, 532 South Fifth Avenue. Variance, based on the following findings of fact and in accordance with the established standards for approval, the Zoning Board of Appeals hereby grants permission from Section 532-2 to alter a non-conforming structure per submitted plans. A, the alteration complies as nearly as practicable with the requirements of the zoning chapter and will not have a detrimental effect on neighboring property.
Do I have support?
Second.
Support from Todd. Julie?
Yes.
Elizabeth?
Yes.
Charlotte?
Yes.
I vote yes. Mike Daniel?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Nicole?
Yes.
Todd?
Yes.
Permission to alter nonconforming structure is granted. Moving on to petition ZBA 18031, 3100 Washtenaw Avenue. John?
I want to thank the secretary, I want to thank you, everybody on this, and I also want to thank you for the comments you gave me last time that I didn't get through, because it did help us along incorporate the changes that we got over here today. Okay, so I appreciate your comments and feedback too. Okay, thank you.
All right, the next petition before us this evening is ZBA 18-031. The address is 3100 Washtenaw Avenue. WPG Management Associates Incorporated, represented by Ryan Vandebosch, is requesting a 6-foot variance from Chapter 55 of the Unified Development Code, Section 5.24.4, subsection 1, for the Arbor Hills Shopping Center. The variance will allow for wall signs to project up to 10 feet from the building wall. The code requires a maximum of 4 feet of projection from building walls currently. The petitioner is seeking to allow the installation of signs that will be attached to the existing steel structures on the storefront facades. If you'll turn your attention to the monitors, the first map is the location map. It's at the corner of Platt and Washtenaw. Everyone's probably familiar with the Arbor Hill Shopping Center. The next map is the aerial photo of the shopping center. And the next slide is the zoomed-in photo of the existing conditions and present neighborhood conditions. A little difficult to see this on your monitors. You may want to look at your packets. This is the ALTA survey that was submitted with the application, showing existing site. The next slide is the site plan that was submitted by the petitioner, and that's also in your packet. And I believe there are, actually it's the next slide, well, and in your packets, right after that, there's some little blue dots you'll see in front of the storefronts. Those are the proposed locations where the tenant signs are going to be proposed to be on the steel structure of architectural structure in front of the storefront facades. These are some of the renderings that were submitted with the application and gives you an idea of what the proposed signage will look like attached to these steel structures. These are photos that were submitted with the application. Just different views from within the interior of the complex. And these are the photos I took when I was out at the property. And here's the perspective. Right now you see there's a wall sign here, and this would allow a 10-foot distance to attach a sign to this steel structure. Like I said, the code allows the 4-foot projection, but not a 10-foot, so the variance request is for 6 foot to allow for these signs to be attached to this. Now, I know some of you are looking at me. There is one sign that's already attached to this, and that's a Lululemon and internal staff permitting mistake, so it's trying to hopefully be corrected tonight. Well, it was permitted previously, yes.
My question.
More pictures of the property, and that's what I just discussed. I can take any questions at this time.
Thank you, John.
You're welcome.
Dave?
I'm looking at these blue dots, and it looks now like Lululemon wants to also put something on the, right along Washtenaw, extending 10 feet out into that, off the right-of-way of Washtenaw Avenue. According to this blue
I'll
dot.
let the applicant supply that answer. I'm getting a head shake of no, so I may, yeah.
Okay, I'll ask the applicant.
Okay, sorry.
Todd?
Yeah, John, I have a question. So this is a very nice shopping area, and I do agree that the signage is a little problematic, although I don't have a problem wayfinding in general in the sites. It's pretty small. But getting back in particular to the signs, this would have been, the signage would have been approved as part of the site plan, right?
No, we do not review signage requirements at site plan level.
Okay, all right. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Julie?
John, is there anything that would preclude them removing those metal things?
The architectural features,
Yeah, that's it.
so your question is, can they remove them?
Right, I mean, there's nothing that would say you couldn't remove those.
They may have to, because that may have been a stipulation in the original site plan.
That's what I'm wondering.
And so that may be something that would have to go to Planning Commission for administrative amendment approval. If that was part of the original approval, and those were the, if these elevations were supplied at Planning Commission level, then to remove them, then you probably know better than I do, then they would probably have to get Planning Commission approval to remove that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for staff? Okay, the petitioner's here. If you could please step forward, state your name for the record, sign in. You'll have 5 minutes.
My name's Ryan Vandenbosch. I am a developer for WPG. We are the owner and manager of Arbor Hills. I just wanted to say, first of all, thanks for your time and consideration. So our retail center was built and opened in 2013 with a somewhat unique architectural element, which are these perforated Corten steel overhangs. You've seen they're located above some but not all of our storefronts. They give Arbor Hills what I would say is a distinct architectural language that's very aesthetically pleasing, but practically has been kind of less than ideal. So we've had both customers and tenants alike complain that these storefronts are somewhat hidden, which inhibits wayfinding, it detracts from the customer experience, and ultimately it does impact sales performance of our tenants. So our request is for the center in general, so that we're not piecemealing or one at a timing. We're addressing the entire center in general. There'd be a total of 7 additional tenants above Lululemon that would be affected. And Again, we're asking for the minimum required variance, which is 6 feet to cover buildings B and C. And obviously, we'll intend to live within the requirements, all other requirements of the ordinance, as far as size and height requirements of signage. As we've talked about, there's a precedent both on our site with Lululemon, but also there is a similar precedent set with last year an approval for 618 Church Street, which was the same in dimension. It was a 10-foot total allowance, 6-foot variance, albeit for different reasons. It was the same dimension. I think it's important to note that all affected tenants sit within the interior of our shopping center, and thus we would have, granting this variance would have no resulting impact on our neighbors or on traffic on Washtenaw and Platt. And Dave, to your question, the blue was merely just calling out the dimension of how far that overhang sits off of the building. It's not necessarily meant to indicate that Lulu would put signage facing Washtenaw. This would all be interior to the center, nothing facing out to Washtenaw or Platt. We've included letters of support from 2 high-quality national tenants that one is a confirmed incoming tenant, one is a prospective tenant, that I think can speak to how important this is to attracting tenants. And I think granting this variance would no doubt go a long way to attracting exciting new tenants as lease expirations come up. And obviously, we want to see we as owners, and I think you guys as city representatives would want to see quality tenants come in and continue to reinvest into the center as they, open or remodel stores. So, thank you.
I apologize for misspeaking on that. So, yeah, if you do look at the blue letters on there, it is the distance from the wall to the edge of the steel structure. So, my mistake.
Thank you. Any questions for the petitioner? Dave?
Are you the architect that came up with this steel architectural feature that creates a language for the?
No, it was actually part of the previous owner's design.
What would be involved in pulling these steel facades back to 4 feet?
It would be, I would say, an extremely prohibitive cost to do that. It's something that we've looked at because of the issue of the hidden storefronts, but ultimately it never really made sense.
When you looked at it, did you have a cost estimate on it?
I don't have that in front of me. We may have something from a previous look, but I don't know the total. I apologize.
Any other questions for the petitioner? So I'll just ask quickly, the intention then would be for the storefronts that are under this facade, they would essentially move their signage or put up signage on these metal structures as
Correct.
opposed to on the wall itself. So it would replace any existing signage that they may have.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we would intend to not necessarily double dip. It's just, well, like I said, live within all the other requirements of the ordinance, so just a one-for-one swap to get that visibility that is so desired.
Okay. Thank you. Any additional, Dave?
I actually have a question for staff.
Okay. Any other questions for the petitioner? Yes, Elizabeth.
When you say that you've heard a lot of complaints from customers and you feel like it's it's diminishing your traffic or the success of the sales performance, what kind of evidence do you have to point to for that?
That would be anecdotal. It's tenants telling us, hey, we've had customers come in and tell us, Yeah, we couldn't see you when we came into the parking lot. We didn't even know you were here before. So it's just really anecdotal support. I don't have anything in writing necessarily.
So you're saying that people who casually come into the parking lot are
Yeah,
not?
so for example, anthropology is one of those that's really hidden underneath this overhang. And, you know, they've told us, we've had customers walk in and say, you know, we didn't even know you guys were in this center when we've come in previously. Maybe they came with a specific purpose. Maybe they were going to Lululemon, and as they looked around, may not have realized that Anthro or North Face are there, or whoever else might be there,
Okay.
so.
Additional questions? Right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dave, your question for staff.
So John, could you go back to that corner the cafe or Zola Bistro is on? Now, this signage here where Zola Bistro, does each storefront have a limit on how much signage they can put up?
Yes, they do. They're restricted to 2 square feet for every linear foot of business frontage they have. So in other words, if they had 25 feet, they'd be allowed a 50 square foot sign, maximum.
And the Zola Bistro here, there's a lot of that sign is just open space. Is it, that square footage, is that calculated on the top to the bottom width by height, or do you make allowance for the open space between the letters?
It's calculated based on the frontage, so it'd be the space of the tenant.
No, I mean the signage. The signage, when you say X number of square feet of signage,
So when an application's submitted and I'm doing my review,
right?
the signed contractors will box that in, and it's basically length times width.
Okay.
And they supply the square footage requirement, or the square footage allowance for me, and I do the calculations as well.
So on this one, is that on the far left of that, I know that whole stretch is Zola Bistro. Is that a Zola Bistro sign at that end also?
Over here, at this far left end,
Yes. The, off on the brick,
right there.
yes.
I am not certain.
I'm pretty sure it is.
Yeah.
I actually eat
Okay.
here at Big Alora and Zola Bistro quite a bit.
So if they were, say, let's just say as my previous example, 50 square feet, they could
Right.
have 2 25 square foot signs.
So if they wanted to all of a sudden come out and put something on this steel architectural feature, kind of looks like President Trump's wall design, you would put that into your calculation to see if they would be able to do that, or if they'd have to take one of the other signages off.
Correct. All additional signage will have to meet the maximum requirement. So if they proposing a 20 square foot sign and only had 10 square foot allowance available, then they'd have to make whatever adjustments.
And that'll apply to all the stores in here, even the Shake Shack, if they should show up. You would use those same standards.
Correct.
Okay.
Todd?
So picking up on what Dave says, that means that, for example, Zola Bistro, if they have a big sign on the architectural distressance, the fancy metalwork, they may have to pull down their other sign. They may.
It's possible.
Yeah,
Yep.
okay. Yep. In any event, you'll just have to comply with the current signage footage requirement.
That's correct.
Correct. Good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Is that signage requirement per facade, or is it cumulative?
Per business frontage. So if each
You could turn
tenant.
the corner and make a.
Yep, and then there'd be maximum of 200 square feet. So if someone had 120 linear feet of business frontage, that would qualify for 240, but they're restricted to 200.
Yeah, go ahead.
The way that this variance is worded, it seems like it's not specific to the placing signage on the architectural feature. Would they be able to jut out from the wall 10 feet, not pertaining to this, just the steel structures?
I don't think that's the applicant's intent, so I don't think they're going to do that. But
Okay.
since I review all sign permits, I would catch that and I will restrict them to.
All right, so that would not be the intent.
application. We can actually, if you want to clarify that in a motion, we can.
Okay.
Yeah, that,
All right, rewinding a little
Shall-
bit, was there
shall we
anyone
attach
here
this
from the
to a
public to
structure?
speak on this petition? I will note, in addition to the letters of support provided by two of the tenants that the applicant mentioned, we also received a letter of support from Terrence McCarthy, the owner at East Haven Animal Hospital. So now we're officially in discussion. Julie?
So the problem I have here is really the self-imposed hardship, because it feels very self-imposed to me. When we granted the Church Street facade, it was because other people had built buildings that came out farther and their signage was hidden. This is not that situation. This is an existing, it was created for this purpose, and I'm having a hard time. It seems to me that if this really detracts from the customer experience, that might be something that the group would like to address, rather than a change in our regulations, that maybe they need to look at the facades as a whole. And so I'm really having a hard time thinking that this is an issue that we need to solve. It seems more like an issue that they need to solve.
Elizabeth?
Piggybacking on that comment, I was wondering, is there signage anywhere on the driveway indicating what all stores are in that shopping plaza?
a business directory sign.
Yeah, like that kind of a, well.
Multi-tenant, there is not one.
Okay, so is there, what would, I don't know this, this ordinance inside and out. Is there, what are the restrictions on that kind of a signage being added on Washtenaw? Or is that, I guess I'm just curious, like, is that even an option?
It
Is something to do?
is an option, yes.
Dave?
Okay.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I actually want to speak to that. One of the purposes of the sign ordinance is to reduce visual pollution, especially along busy streets like Washtenaw, so that as people are driving by or as in these trafficked areas, that you're not adding confusion to what people see. And people have asked us to put, in addition to the signage on the stores, to put one of those big guide signs. But what happens is pretty much they have to choose sometimes, because they're not allowed to, it takes away their square footage of signage that they're allowed to have on the building. And John could probably go more into it. But in terms of the purpose of the sign ordinance, I don't personally have any problems with the signage on the interior of the parking lot, because it's not adding to the visual clutter in the public right-of-way. I would be opposed to giving a variance of anything along Washtenaw. So if they were going to add more signage on Washtenaw, I would not be favorable to this. And also, I am somewhat thinking about Julie's concerns about essentially the self-imposition of this, because the developers created this situation. Maybe not this owner, but the former owner. So I am trying to weigh Julie's points of view and her argument there. But at the same time, in terms of what's interior to the parking area, that doesn't bother me at all.
Ken, yeah.
Todd?
Yeah, I think Julie and Dave, you took the two halves of what I'm weighing in my head. It clearly is self-imposed, but the applicant's point was a good one, that this is really internal to the site, and we're not cluttering up the public thoroughfare. My personal experience with this, I happen to like this. I think it's a very pleasing development, but I remember when my wife and we've only eaten at Zola Bistro once, and we were in there looking for it, and it took us a little while to find it. Not that we didn't have the time to find it, but I can understand that it's not the most obvious where all the stores are. And that one's a corner, and some of the other ones, Brooks Brothers, for example, is less visible. So I think there is a need for the added sign. Do the applicant, the previous owners, or the architect do it to this site? Yes. But is it really, I'm more comfortable in my mind in saying this is okay because the purpose of the signage, as you mentioned, David, is not to clutter up the public thoroughfare. And this is really, these signs are not for notice on the street, but function as internal wayfinding. And on that basis, I think I'm leaning toward approving this. I'm not totally convinced, but that's where I'm going.
Mike?
I'm not gonna, I think reasonable points have been made on both sides of this. I live on the west side, so I don't get to this shopping center a lot. When I go in there, it's always hard to find a parking spot. It's always super busy, and I have a hard time finding where I'm going to because this is internal, and I've experienced this myself. And the architectural features, to me, putting these signs on the steel buttresses, to me, I mean, they're equivalent to me of putting on the face of the store. So all of those factors push me a little bit over, and I'm going to vote for this.
Yeah, and I'll just say, kind of piggybacking on what you just said, Mike, that's kind of how I look at it. Although these steel structures are not integral to the foundation of the building, in my mind, it's essentially an extension of the building wall. So by moving the sign up into that area, you're just putting it in a different portion of the building wall in some regard. So I am inclined to be more supportive of it, I guess, than I might be otherwise. Any additional discussion or motion? Julie?
Could we put something in about not projecting out for all of, only on the ones that have this facade?
That's the intent of the petitioner as well, so, yeah, only to be attached to steel structures and not the business walls.
Right, because this kind of continues with whoever's in here, and hopefully you'll be in your position for a very long time, but 10 years from now, if these all have signs jutting out from the facades, it would be odd.
And there will be copious notes in the system.
Dave?
I'm willing to make a motion, although I do want to specify that I would not vote to allow this variance along Washtenaw Avenue. And I could simply add it to this line here, a variance to allow wall signs to project up to 10 feet from the building wall, except along Washtenaw Avenue, if that would be permissible.
Or you could say, attached only to the steel structures within the interior of the center.
Perfect.
I prefer that wording, Dave, because one sense, what is along, because the entire development is along Washington Avenue.
It's also
Right.
along Platt.
And Platt.
So how did you word that, John?
Wall signs to be attached to the steel structures only and to the interior of the center.
I have a question. I read far enough into the sign ordinance about reducing visual clutter, but I do know of other businesses further down Washtenaw that have these store directories on Washtenaw. Did those require variances? Do we not allow store directories on Washtenaw in front of shopping plazas? Because I guess that's my question. I appreciate the interest in not wanting to, in a hypothetical variance asking for that, but I mean, is that not something that they could do by right?
I am not aware of them not able to do a business center sign by right, so
So some of those have gotten variances. Some of
Okay.
them have done it by right if they meet the standards.
Okay,
And others, we have plenty of situations where signs pre-existed our sign ordinance.
oh, gotcha, okay.
Okay.
Maybe some of the directories that I've seen pre-existed the sign ordinance then.
Possible.
that's very possible, that They've been there a long time, they're non-conforming.
Gotcha, okay.
Yes, I guess I'll officially invite you up to ask
you.
if you've explored the
Yeah,
opportunity
just
of.
speaking to that subject, we had explored that previously, and I think John would know this regulation better than I, but there is a limitation on total signage for the entire center.
Right.
And that's what precluded us from including a pylon or a directory. So we've
Gotcha,
explored that and have chosen to just stick with our storefronts.
okay.
So, thank you.
Okay, I'm prepared to make a motion.
Thank you, Dave.
Petition ZBA 18-031, 3100 Washtenaw Avenue. Variance. Based on the following findings of fact and in accordance with the established standards for approval, the Zoning Board of Appeals hereby grants the following variance from Chapter 55, Unified Development Code, Section 524-4, subsection 1. A variance to allow wall signs to project up to 10 feet from the building wall attached to the steel facade structure within the interior of the center. A, the alleged practical difficulties are peculiar to the property and result from conditions which do not exist generally throughout the city. B, that the practical difficulties which will result from a failure to grant the variance include substantially more than mere inconvenience, inability to attain a higher financial return, or both. The variance, C, the variance, if granted, will not significantly affect surrounding properties. D, the circumstances of the variance request are not self-imposed. E, the variance request is the minimum necessary to achieve reasonable use of the land or structure.
Do I have support from Mike? Mike,
Yes.
Dave,
Yes.
Nicole,
Yes.
Todd,
Yes.
Julie,
Yes.
Elizabeth,
Yes,
Charlotte.
Yes.
I also vote yes, the request is approved. Moving on to petition ZBA 18032, 800 Princeton Street. John?
The next petition before us this evening is ZBA 18-032. The address is 800 Princeton Street. Megan and Stephen Christ, represented by Don Zuber Architect, are seeking a 7-foot 2-inch variance from Chapter 55, the Unified Development Code, Table 5:17-1, to allow for the construction of an attached garage into the required rear yard setback. The property is zoned R2A, two-family. However, the R1D single-family district setbacks apply as the proposed use of the property is single-family. The R1D district requires a 20-foot rear yard setback. The subject property is located in the Old West Side neighborhood, south of West Madison and east of South 7th Street. The existing home, which was built in 1952, will be demolished. The lot is 6,054 square feet in size. The proposed new single-family home will be 2,400 square feet in size and contain 4 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms. The garage will be attached and be accessed from the alley at the rear of the property. The variance is required as the garage is attached rather than a detached garage. If you'll follow along on the slides, the first one is the location map. You see the parcel is highlighted in yellow. The next slide is the aerial map showing surrounding neighborhoods, properties, and existing conditions. The next slide is the aerial zoomed-in property, and this is the alley back here, and which will provide access to the rear of the property. And this existing home will be demolished. This is the survey and the site plan that was submitted with the application. And you can see that alley and the garage is in the shaded area attached to the home. The next slides are floor plans, which you can probably see better in your packets, of the floor plans that were submitted with the application and the proposed construction of the new home. Additional floor plans. Some more floor plans, and these are the elevations that were submitted. You see the garage back here from the side view. And I believe this is the front of the home, proposed front. You see the facade, or the proposed facade of the garage, and another side elevation of the attached garage. These are the photos I took when I was out at the property inspecting. It's the current home that will be demolished. This is the backyard of the property, and the alley is on the opposite side of this fence. This is just looking back out towards Princeton and the rear of the existing home. This is standing in the alley, looking back into the property where the garage will be accessed in the rear of the property, the egress into the property. This is the adjoining neighboring property that shows how they are currently accessing their property and a garage access off that alley. This is looking down the alleyway. This is the adjacent property to the east, I believe it is, yes. And this is the adjacent property to the west. That's the end of my presentation, and I will take questions at this time.
Thanks, John. Todd?
Yes, John, so looking at your staff report and their application, it seems to me that before the revised ordinance, they would not have needed to have come here.
That's correct.
And ironically, of course, a detached garage would be farther apart, and here with an attached garage, of course, it's closer to the house. So it's farther away from the lot line because it is attached, same size garage.
That's correct.
Okay. I mean, it's just somewhat ironic, but obviously they're behaving properly and they need to apply for a variance. Okay. Thank you.
Dave?
So isn't this part of the Old West Side Historic District?
No, it's not. The property is not a historic.
But there's a historic district, right? The Old West Side?
It's
So
right
where does
outside.
that- I know-
It's right outside of that
Because I know people that have had to not change their front doors because of historic
I
considerations.
think the historic district line runs just north of their property. I know these are, but this property is not historic. That alleyway actually separates the two districts, because I know I was at a complaint about a property in the immediate area vicinity, and they were in the historic. This is not.
Okay.
Julie?
John, the curb cuts on this, so there'll be a curb cut in the front and then off the alley also? Or I could ask the petitioner.
Yeah, they will actually be in contact with the engineering department about any type of access off that alley for if there's going to be, the improvement or additional impervious concrete or asphalt, improved surface added to that, extending off of that.
Any other questions for staff? Okay, the petitioner's here. If you could please step forward, state your name for the record, sign in. You'll have 5 minutes.
Hello, my name is Dawn Zuber. I'm going to have my associate sign me in so we can keep the meeting moving. I originally met my clients, Megan and Steve Christ, just over 2 years ago, and we've been planning this project since then. And just as a little bit of background, the Christs did not intend to tear this home down when they first bought the property. They planned to move into it and use it, and unfortunately, between the time that they purchased the property and the time that they were scheduled to move in, Megan had a spinal cord injury and is confined to an electric wheelchair. We designed this home to accommodate her needs with the chair, and in fact, when I first started talking to the city about doing this, I actually talked to Matt Kowalski, who pointed out to me that the old Chapter 55 allowed us to build an attached garage in the required rear yard as long as it was less than 35% of the required rear yard. That's really hard for me to say. So that's why we chose to design it this way. On a morning like this morning, I'm sure you can appreciate it's difficult for those of us who have the use of our legs to maneuver on the ice, it's extremely difficult for somebody in a wheelchair to do that. So that's why Megan and Steve would like to have an attached garage. And I also want to point out that the home is designed to, obviously it's a bigger house than many in the neighborhood. And by the way, John, our actual square footage is 3,216, including the second floor. I think that the number you have is just the first floor square footage. The home is designed to be as compact as possible, given the size that we have. But you may be aware that when you use a wheelchair, you need more space to maneuver. So some of the spaces in the home are bigger than they would be for a home that didn't have a user, a future resident that used a wheelchair. I think, so like I said, I tried to design the home so that it's keeping in as best it can in scale with the other homes in the neighborhood. So I'm happy to answer any questions that I can.
Thank you. Questions for the petitioner?
You guys are making it easy. Oh.
I see on the foundation and basement plan that there's noted future bedroom, future bathroom. Can you, I guess, can describe the intention for that, I guess?
Yeah, the intention is just in the future to build a guest bedroom and bathroom in the basement. So, if you guys want to add anything to that, feel free.
Just keeping options open.
Any additional questions for the petitioner? Julie?
I think I'm sort of fixated on this driveway. I see it says existing driveway to be used as mud tracking mat during construction. Will it then continue to be a driveway, or?
We'd like to keep the curb cut there. There's not intended to be any paving, correct, Steve?
Yeah.
Do you want to come up?
Should I?
Yes, to the microphone, please,
Yeah.
just.
Sorry, Steve, Chris, and the Megans. Anyway, yeah, we've talked a little bit. So water management was something that we were kind of concerned about while we were putting this together, because we're taking up a lot of the permeable surface of the lot. So we were actually going to not have a driveway there for that reason, and we were debating putting down, they make plastic tacks that are hard that you can still park on top of without ruining the lawn. So we still want to have the curb cut there. I still, on a decent number of occasions, would probably park out front instead of going through the alley to park in the garage. Plus, I'm a nerd. I like cars, and I might have a toy in the garage. So, but yeah, the plan is not to have pavement on the driveway.
Additional questions? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone here from the public to speak on this petition? I will note that we did receive a letter of support from Peter Carpenter, as well as from Marita, who I'm assuming is an adjacent neighbor, but it's unclear from this letter. With that, we are in discussion. Todd?
Yes, so this sounds, maybe brutal isn't really the right word, but when you issue a zoning variance, of course, we're doing something that runs with the land so that the current owners and future occupants are physically disabled is actually irrelevant to the criteria we look at in considering this. That said, to have a new home that's built from scratch to be completely wheelchair accessible and available for somebody who is in a wheelchair full-time, I'm not assuming you are, but full-time, is an amazing thing, and there's obviously an incredible market shortage for this type of property. So I'm also looking at this as they're having to be here because of a change in the ordinance, a change that is somewhat technical and, in my view, minor. The garage being attached will be closer and farther away from the lot lines, as John, my question to John, and John agreed. So in balance, I'm really glad to see this type of property designed this way. And in terms of the particular things that before us and looking at a variance, I'm comfortable with approving this, so I'll be voting yes.
Additional discussion? Or motion, if we're ready? Mike?
This is petition ZBA 18-033, 3309 Edgewood Drive. Based on the following findings of fact and in accordance with the established standards for approval, the Zoning Board of Appeals hereby grants, oh crap, sorry. I'm reading the wrong one. That's not my motion. I was just making sure everyone was listening. All right, here's my actual motion that I meant to read. This is petition ZBA 18-032, 800 Princeton Street. Based on the following findings of fact and in accordance with the established standards for approval, the Zoning Board of Appeals hereby grants the following variance from Chapter 55 Unified Development Code, Table 517-1, single-family residential zoning district dimensions, a variance of 7 feet 2 inches to allow construction of an attached garage into the required 20-foot rear yard setback. The garage is to be built per the submitted plans. A, the alleged practical difficulties are peculiar to the property and result from conditions which do not exist generally throughout the city. B, that practical difficulties which will result from a failure to grant the variance include substantially more than mere inconvenience, inability to attain a higher financial return, or both. C, the variance, if granted, will not significantly affect surrounding properties. D, the circumstances of the variance request are not self-imposed. E, the variance request is the minimum necessary to achieve reasonable use of the land or structure.
Have a motion, do I have support? From Todd?
Yes.
Julie? Elizabeth?
Yes.
Charlotte?
Yes.
I vote yes. Mike Daniel?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Nicole?
Yes.
Request is granted. Moving on to petition ZBA 18033, 3309 Edgewood Drive. John?
Okay, the next petition before us this evening is ZBA 18-033. Address is 3309 Edgewood Drive. Allison and Benjamin Tatum, property owners, are requesting a 10-foot, 1-inch variance from Chapter 55 Unified Development Code, Table 517-1, to allow for the construction of an attached garage into the required front yard setback. The property is zoned R1C Single Family and has an average front setback of 40 feet. The subject property is located on a corner lot in the Pittsfield neighborhood at the intersection of Edgewood Drive and Parkwood Avenue. The home was built in 1942 and is approximately 1,000 square feet in size. The owners are proposing to construct a 24-foot by 24-foot attached two-car garage along with a 24-foot by 15-foot two-story addition. The first story of the addition will consist of a dining room. The second story will consist of a new bathroom, 2 bedrooms, and a bonus room above the garage. If you turn your attention to the monitors, the first slide is the location map. You see the highlighted parcel at the corner of Edgewood and Parkwood Drive. The next map, slide is the aerial map of the property. And you see it at the corner. And the next slide is the zoomed-in aerial photo and existing conditions of the property and adjacent properties. The next slide is the survey that was submitted with the application. The addition will be right here to the side of the existing home, and the proposed 24 by 24 foot garage will be right here at the front of the existing home. And as you can see on the in your packet, it's a little hard to read on there. If you look, it says 29.9 feet to the front property line, and that's where the 10-foot, 1-inch variance request comes from. The next slide are the floor plans that were submitted with the application, showing some of the improvements of the property on the, I believe this is the second floor. These are the elevations that were submitted with the application. You can see the garage, proposed garage as it would look finished in the foreground and the addition to the background. And these are some elevations from the side, and you see the garage with a smaller slight projection from the existing face of the house, and then you see the addition from this side, and then you just flip that elevation over to the other side. 2 different side profiles of the proposed construction. These are my photos that I took when I was at the property. You see the front of the house, and you see that they currently do not have a garage at the property. And this is the proposed location of where the garage will be approximately located. This is the back of the house, showing the existing conditions. The petitioner has sloping topography and heavily wooded areas in the rear yard, along with the power lines from the house, as you can see in this picture, going into the house. So there are some obstacles to construction in the rear yard. And there's a little photo of the power lines and some of the heavy vegetation and forested trees in the rear yard. And this is looking from the rear yard out onto Parkwood. And this is from Parkwood looking into the back of the yard, and this is the rear of the home. This is at the front of the home and looking directly to the east, and you see the adjacent property and how the two homes correlate to one another in the plane. And then the proposed garage would, come out here and project out here into the driveway. This is the proposed area where the addition would be, and looking out onto Edgewood Drive. This is looking across Parkwood to an adjacent neighbor to the west, across the street, and that's the neighbor directly adjacent to the east. That's the end of my presentation, and I will take any questions at this time.
Thank you, John. Questions for staff? Elizabeth?
Can you go back to the shot where we're looking at the neighbor adjacent, and you were using the cursor to identify where the garage would stick out? Yes, that one. Do you have when you were using compass directions, I got a little muddled. Do you have a shot that's like the opposite direction? Like if I were standing seeing that and I turned exactly around towards Parkwood, is it Parkwood?
Yes. And
Okay.
right there.
Okay, so that's okay, thank you. I was trying to visualize that garage blocking a view of the neighbor or something, and I see that they're looking at a house. They're not looking at like a forest or something. Okay.
And,
Okay.
and so just for a little bit more information, the R1C district has a 25-foot rear yard, or excuse me, front yard, required front yard, but the average front setback is 40 feet for this neighborhood because of the homes that are set so far back. Their home is back 45 feet, the neighbors are 46. The maximum you can use is 40. And so they're proposing the 30-foot setback, which would still meet the R1C district requirements of 25, but they have this, as you can see from the aerial photos, this large setbacks. You see how far the homes
Yes.
sit back from the road. Plus, they have that extra, 10 feet approximately of public right-of-way. So when you do the average, I'm measuring from the property line, it's like 46 feet, and that's what the average is creating. So the maximum you can use is 40. Hopefully, I explained that well.
You stated it well.
Okay, good.
Dave?
So looking at this photo, I know there are no sidewalks in this neighborhood. In fact, in a lot of areas, there's not even curb and gutter. This yellow line, if there were someday in the future sidewalks in this neighborhood, it would be right outside of this yellow line?
Correct. It'd be between the property line and the asphalt, the ribbon asphalt of the street.
Okay.
Additional questions? Okay, the petitioner's here. If you could please step forward, state your name for the record, sign in. You'll have 5 minutes.
Hi, I'm Allie Tatum. I'm here with my husband, Ben. I bought this house back in 2012. at the time, single female, and it was perfect size home at that point for me. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom. I since have gotten married and now have an 8-month-old at home. And because of that, my family dynamic has changed, but I've really kind of grown into this neighborhood. I know that you have 2 letters of support in front of you from my neighbors. One from the first photo that you wanted to see, where they're the people right next to me on the east hand side, and then directly across the street where you can see down at the bottom of the photo that's up, you can see their driveway currently. So they're like the 2 that would be impacted the most in seeing the garage and the addition portion that would be added. I have a 3rd letter of support also from an adjacent neighbor along Parkwood that happened to be out of town, but got that taken care of today before we got here. I think in general, you know, we enjoy what we have here. We are very limited because of being on a corner lot from our setbacks. This really is the place to add a garage if there's going to be a garage added to this property at all, because of what the backyard consists of. So I'm happy to field any questions that you have if, as you were looking through the information provided, that's not clear, or just in general.
Thank you. Any questions for the petitioner? Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on this petition? Seeing no one, I will note that we did receive letters of support from Dale Hammer at 3318 Edgewood, as well as 3321 Edgewood Drive. We are in discussion. Or maybe ready for a motion. Dave?
I'd actually just like to say something.
Sure.
I'm going to support this, but my sensibility is always to see, I don't like seeing the fronting on the street as people walk by. And I don't know what kind of pedestrian use you have in the neighborhood. I do know there are a lot of families that live in this neighborhood. And in fact, our new state senator lives about a block away from you. I don't like to see garages fronting out as the front facade of the house, and I just think it diminishes the streetscape and the kind of the interaction between people and their neighbors as they're pedestrians in the neighborhood. And I know there aren't sidewalks, but I do know that people walk in the streets because there's not a lot of traffic in the neighborhood. But I would, although I'm voting for this, if you could talk to your architect and see if there might be some ways to make it set the garage back a little bit and still be able to meet your needs with the rear. And don't need interaction. I'm just a suggestion that I think it would be nice for, as this neighborhood grows and people upgrade their homes throughout this area, it would be a good way of kind of setting a tone to not just be putting parking garages at the front of your homes.
Any additional discussion?
I'm sympathetic to the backyard challenge. That really looks like a trick. It makes perfect sense to me that this is really the only option if you're going to expand this house.
I'm ready for a motion.
Okay, thank you, Dave.
I'm going to make the motion Mike tried to make last time. Petition ZBA 18-033, 3309 Edgewood Drive. Variance. Based on the following findings of fact and in accordance with the established standards for approval, the Zoning Board of Appeals hereby grants the following variance from Chapter 55, Unified Development Code, Table 5:17-1, Single-Family Residential Zoning District Dimensions. a variance of 10 feet 1 inch to allow construction of an attached garage into the required 40-foot front yard setback. The garage is to be built per the submitted plans. A, the alleged practical difficulties are peculiar to the property and result from conditions which do not exist generally throughout the city. B, that the practical difficulties which will result from a failure to grant the variance include substantially more than mere inconvenience, inability to attain a higher financial return, or both. C, the variance, if granted, will not significantly affect surrounding properties. D, the circumstances of the variance request are not self-imposed. E, the variance request is the minimum necessary to achieve reasonable use of the land or structure.
I have support. Nicole?
I'll support.
All right. Charlotte?
Yes.
I vote yes. Mike Daniel?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Nicole?
Yes.
Todd?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
Elizabeth?
Yes.
The request is granted. Moving on, we have no unfinished business. We've dealt with new business as well as reports and communications. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak? Seeing no one, do I have a motion to adjourn? From Mike, support from Julie, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.